welcome back to the Comics Multiverse. This evening we have another uh, Kickstarter creator that we're going to be chatting with. The project is Pistol Shrimp. Uh, Very interesting concept, and so let me go ahead and bring in the Kim. I forgot his name. That's really bad of me. But
Hey,
hey, Charlie, sorry about that.
what's up? No, you're good. No worries, man. Charlie McFarland, that's me.
Yeah.
Uh,
So tell me, before we get talking about Pistol Shrimp, which I read the first issue over on Global Comics.
yeah.
Um, Tell me a little bit about yourself, about your history with comics as both a reader and as a creator.
I've been, as far as creating comics, I've been doing it non-professionally for years. I was a kid drawing comic books. What actually got me into it, as far as a reader, goes back even before I was reading actual comic books. I think I started with like Captain Underpants, reading, the little handmade
My,
looking comics in the books.
my son is into that currently.
That's amazing to me that those are still so popular, because I had to be in the third or fourth grade when I was reading those, and they were still relatively new. But something about seeing those books, and it was, the hand drawn looking comics. I was like, oh, you mean you can just make your own comics at any given moment? And that's very inspiring to me. And then beyond that, I started reading. I never was, heavy on the Marvel superheroes, DC superheroes. I always kind of went more for like Vertigo books or Image Comics kind of stuff. I like Spider-Man, but really that was about the only Ultimate Spider-Man, I think, was the only run I ever read start to finish for traditional superheroes. Um, Beyond that, once about 2012, I started looking for an artist to do serious comic book writing. Had
Hmm.
my first published series, maybe finally in like 2019. I did a series called The Citizen with Action Lab Comics, which whole thing, man. if you've been keeping up with Action Lab,
Trust me. I actually, not to get off topic, but
yeah,
I know the guys who originally created it. I know that they are not happy with what eventually happened. But
I was gonna say, yeah, I'd imagine it's a whole different beast than what they had envisioned when they set it up. But I was happy to be published. So I mean, regardless of how things panned out with them, I'm happy that I had a book that hit the shelves. It ran for 4 issues before everything started to kind of fall apart there at Action Lab. And that's kind of what brought me to make the series I'm here to talk about today, which is Pistol Shrimp. I wanted to do something kind of independently on my own that I could run for as long as I feel like running it. But, we're running a Kickstarter right now, so I guess as long as we get the funding for that.
right. So let's kind of dive into that. Uh, Dive in, water, drink. Sorry, bad.
I've heard
So
I've
what
heard a
is
lot of those lately.
so tell me about kind of, let's start off with an overview of what the story is about.
Mm-hmm. Pistol Shrimp is just I've been describing it as an under the sea Western action comedy series. It's meant to be, I mean, if you can't tell from the title, a little bit on the silly side. Um, but the whole premise basically is this main character, Pistol Shrimp, who was a sea creature in a Red Lobster style restaurant fish tank, who him and his wife get dumped into the ocean somehow, splits them apart, and Pistol Shrimp is now on his quest to find her, be reunited with his wife. And that's kind of just the big picture plot to kind of get him set out on his adventure. But that's pretty much the premise of the first issue, is him, starting this quest going, and it's kind of getting to miscellaneous adventures. I kind of envisioned it something like if you've ever watched a show, or something like Mad Max or Ash versus the Evil Dead was what I was going to say, where it's really just the silly main character going from place to place, getting into kind of ridiculous adventures. It's kind of how I envisioned it.
So where did you get the idea for the Western shrimp?
I wish I had a really good answer that was really profound or something, but it was literally just hearing the name pistol shrimp because it's a creature that already, exists in nature. Me and my friends at work kind of were just having, the discussion over what we thought the coolest sounding animals were. And pistol shrimp came up, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like it would just be some kind of underwater badass. So it kind of just spawned from that.
Okay, if that's where it came from, then
Yeah.
that's cool.
It's been a lot of fun to write though. I mean, I some of the going back to sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm kind of that's how my brain works a little bit. But going back to your question about like what kind of comics I've read, like I kind of pictured it like stuff like Preacher. If you've read all Preacher before, I wanted this Western character because I wanted Pistol Shrimp to be this likable main protagonist who isn't necessarily, the most complex guy. He's pretty simple-minded in many ways. He's a little bit on the dumb side at times, but he's very good-hearted protagonist who's, always trying to do the right thing to the point where sometimes it causes more trouble than it's worth. But the reason I bring up Preacher is I liked Jesse Custer in that story. There was one random issue where it's like, not to say he's simple-minded or anything. I think he's a very complex character. But there was this moment in Preacher that I always thought was this really cool character moment where he's about to get into this fight with I don't even remember who it was at this point in the story. And the whole premise of Preacher, if you've read it, he's got like the power, the voice of God, and he can use this power to make people do whatever he wants. And he gets into this fist fight with this guy. And they get in this fight, they beat each other down, and Jesse wins the fist fight. And finally someone's like, well, why didn't you just use the voice of God? And he's just like, forgot I had it. And something about that character moment of like this guy who's just, I don't know. I found that just really inspiring. Just great writing, I think. And I've always wanted to write some kind of character like that. Some just does the right thing, doesn't always think first.
I think it has, after reading the first issue, it has some really nice comedic beats. I mean, I like the part where the guy, the fish is trapped under the anchor, and
Yeah.
he's like trying to help him, and they're like, "Have you ever done this before?" And he's like, "Well, no, but after this happens, I can say I have."
And like I said, that whole scene there's that whole moment and this first issue, like you said earlier, it's free on Global Comics. So if anybody's watching, they want to figure out what this is all about. Whole issue, first issue, is free on Global Comics. But that whole little scene there was basically me just trying to write a moment where he's in a hurry, he's about to go somewhere, and then he sees this fish trapped, and he's like, and there's a moment where he like thinks about it, like, should I keep going? I've got somewhere to be. I'm on it. I'm in a hurry, but he has to do the right thing. He wants to do the right thing. And I kind of wanted to use this moment to show, like, yeah, he'll put others before himself. And then, of course, if you read that scene, it doesn't even really necessarily work out in the fish's best interest, but he tries. That's what matters.
A for effort.
Yeah. And that's kind of the premise of this whole character is he's a good guy trying to do good things that sometimes work out, but he might not be the brightest guy.
And the scene before that in the bar where he takes care of the sharks, and then he's like, now it's time to for my free.
I wanted to give him the cliche action hero, one-liners when he walks in the bar too. I think one of the fish says something about like there's a whole exchange where it's brought up somebody wearing cement shoes and why that wouldn't make sense if you already are underwater. And Pistol Shrimp kind of enters and is like, the only person that's going to be wearing cement shoes is, and it's a really convoluted one-liner that doesn't necessarily make sense to the point where another character brings it up again later. But again, Pistol Shrimp is maybe a little dim sometimes, but I think that kind of adds to the charm of the character.
So tell me a little bit about the rest of the creative team that you worked with on the first issue and on the second issue.
Yeah. So we've got the exact same team coming back for the second issue. Artist is Luis Morocho. He's from Peru. He's actually worked with Marvel Comics. He was involved in one of their milestone initiatives where they had, you know, people come in and do anthology work. And he, I think, got to write for the Miles Morales character, which I'm, you know, like I said, I've only run of Marvel Comics I've ever read all the way through was Ultimate Spider-Man, so I was pretty stoked when he told me that. We've also got on colors, and Antonio Ramos-Wong is his name. And honestly, I wasn't familiar with his work. When I hired Luis, I was like, hey, we're going to need somebody to do the colors. Is there anybody you know that does a pretty solid job that you've worked with in the past? I was like, well, I'm willing to hire someone that you know does good work, because the last comic I did, The Citizen, I had the artist do the colors as well. So it's like I never had to, you know, just find my own independent colorist. He recommended Antonio, and I looked up his portfolio, and he just incredible. He does commissions all the time. He's got all kinds of stuff on his Instagram. So I reached out to him, hired him pretty much on the spot. He already knew who Luis was, so that worked out. And then our letterer, Buddy Beaudoin, I want to say is how it's pronounced. I've never actually had to say it out loud, but it's Beaudoin.
Actually, I know him. He lives here. He lives in the same city that I do.
Do you know how his last name's pronounced? Because I would love to know.
I've always said like Bedouin. I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
But he actually, I kind of poached him because I found out his work through, he did Crash and Troy, which is a comic by Jared Lujan. And that's kind of where I discovered him from. And I took him away. I was like, hey, I saw your work on this. Can I like hire you? Yeah, of course. So, and he's coming back for the second issue too. He hasn't actually started work on it yet. I told him beforehand. I was like, hey, I'm getting, you know, the Kickstarter together, trying to get the funds, and then once that's ready, are you still on board? He was like, yeah, 100%. Excited to have him back because he does great work.
So we've kind of talked about where the first issue goes. I mean, it's also you know, sets up who Pistol Shrimp is and what, you know, where's the second issue going to take readers?
I've actually, and you can, if you go to our Kickstarter page, just look it up on Kickstarter, Pistol Shrimp. It's probably, I can't imagine there's more than one, but if you go and look at it, you can already see from the first couple pages we've shown up, it's picking up basically more or less right after the first issue. You can already see some new characters being introduced that Pistol Shrimp has impacted in some way, and it opens with a funeral scene for actually some characters we've met in Pistol Shrimp 1. Some characters were in an altercation. One of them died. We're now at the funeral opening page, and you see the consequences of Pistol Shrimp's actions as he's looking for his wife has rippled out, and now there's this new crew of people that know who he is, and that's kind of where issue 2 takes us. The whole idea with this series being, I like each of my issues to tell, you know, a full, complete story. That's what I did with The Citizen. I wanted it to be every issue is its own thing. But Pistol Shrimp, I'm trying to do also a almost like each arc is like almost a full story in its own right, with each chapter being still beginning, middle, end. You still feel like you get a full episode each time, full chapter each time, but it is going to be a long form narrative as well. So that's where issue 2 picks up is pretty much direct consequences of his actions in issue 1. And if that sounds a little vague, it is, but you'll see it.
No. I mean, I think being vague is good. That means it will make fun people to don't tell them what it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to give too much away, but I think people who've read the first one will be happy with this where the second one goes, and it's still just as ridiculous in its own right.
So, tell me about the different. What are you offering people? What the rewards you're offering for the campaign support?
So this Kickstarter, this is my second Kickstarter because we also kickstarted the first issue. And I learned a lot from that first Kickstarter because I felt like the first Kickstarter was successful, and I kind of felt like I had a lot of help from, local friends and family who were just like, hey, we don't even care about this comic. We're just helping you out because you're a good friend of ours. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. But it taught me like, hey, when I'm doing this second issue around, make sure you got everything ready. Make sure you got stuff that comic readers are going to want. So we've got now multiple tiers, with the first tier starting as low as $3. $3 gets you the digital second issue. First issue is already free. Like I said, you can read that. You can have the second issue ready to go. That's just for $3. Bump that up to $7, and I got together with basically a bunch of other indie creators to get several first issues of random digital comics. So for $7, you get not only Pistol Shrimp 1 and 2, you also get the first issue of Lost Between Worlds. That's a campaign that's actually going on right now. It's a whole sword and sorcery kind of magic story. You get the issue 0, I think is what it's called on that one, but it's Lost Between Worlds. You also get a story called Off-World, which is drawn by the same artist that did Pistol Shrimp, and it's an aliens landing on Earth kind of story. It was very cool. I read it. There's a series called Based on a True Story by Brett Juliano, and those are really cool because he does this really cartoony style of these true stories. Like he's got one about like Al Capone, and he just does comic strips telling the story of these real life events and things that have happened. And I've also got one called The Unbodied, which is somebody I met through Global Comics, because I was looking for like, hey, anybody want to pitch in? I'll get your #1 issue, and this is like kind of a cool horror comic as well. So we've got all these multiple comics you're getting for just $7, which to me sounds like a pretty good deal. Don't know, but beyond that, once we get to the physical comics, you got $12 gets you a physical copy of Pistol Shrimp #2, as well as everything before it. So you're still getting all those digital comics. $20, we've got 2 variant covers. One of them is the variant cover drawn by Alexander Jovic, who drew my last comic, The Citizen, which I talked about earlier. So we called that the reunion cover. Looks pretty cool. Check it out. He came back and did that one. And then I've got the manga variant cover, which is drawn by my friend Cole Thomas Anderson. And that one's incredible. I honestly, I asked him to do a variant cover for me, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to go over, because Pistol Shrimp, is not a manga. I don't know if it's going to look okay, but I thought it'd be cool to have that option, and he knocked it out of the park. I was amazed by that one. He did the colors and everything. I've never really seen him work with colors the way he did that one. So you can get either of those covers for $20. I just added, and I wish I would have done this right off the bat, for $22 you get the first and second issue physical copies of each, as well as the Indie Comics bundle. You could always get the first copy, but people didn't realize it because I didn't have that reward up there. It was like a little add-on you could do. So I'm hoping people realize now, hey, you can still get the first issue physical copy. And then for $50, you get all 3 variant covers. You get the Indie Comics bundle. You get all the digital stuff, as well as an enamel pin of the King Brillup Comics logo, which is the logo on the corner of every issue of Pistol Shrimp. It's the little made-up comic company I put on because I was like, it's missing something, so it's got to have a publisher logo there. Even if it's a made-up publisher, it's going to be what I'll be putting all my comics under the label of for now. Mm-hmm. So $50 is the maximum tier, and that gets you everything. So
and
I wasn't trying to go too big, but.
And what's your goal?
Goal is 5,000. Last I checked, we're at 2160, I think, or something like that. So still a little over halfway to go, but we've got about 2 weeks left to go. So just trying to get the word out there to as many people as we can. And it's all or nothing. So if we don't get it, yeah.
So, I mean, I know this. You said this is only your second Kickstarter, and you did learn, a couple things from your first experience. But are you noticing any, trends that are different this time with people supporting?
Well, like I said, my first Kickstarter, I had a lot of like random. I'm in a kind of small town, so when they hear, oh, somebody in this town's making a comic book, that's crazy. So they all kind of rallied around for that first Kickstarter. And I had always said at the end of that first Kickstarter, I was like, hey, I'm so thankful that I had so many friends and family, but I'd always kind of wished I had more just genuine comic book readers kind of jumping on and actual fans of comics. And as much as thankful as I am for everybody that backed that first one, I was like, man, I wish people were backing it because they want to read the story, not just because they're trying to help me out personally. And
Mhm.
so the second time around, it's almost the opposite. I feel like I've been getting a lot of people who are just comic book people and wanting to read it, and that's awesome. But it also is a little more difficult because I'm small time. You know, I've only had one published series. Not a lot of people know who I even am. They've never heard of The Citizen or any of my comics. So it's like I've got to, you know, I'm on Twitter and I'm not shutting up about it. I'm always posting because I'm like, this is all I got. Like I've got to put my name out there and I've got to find some way to get people's attention. So the biggest difference I'm noticing between these two campaigns is it's a lot more reaching out to people I've never met, don't know anything about me. I feel like I'm really having to prove that I'm not just, you know, trying to swindle these people. Like I've got an actual product and I'm trying to show that it's worth the money. And it is a little more difficult but it's what I wanted ultimately. Because I didn't want people to just keep, you know, giving me money because they were like, here you go. Like we believe in you, but we're not going to read it. Just have fun. I wanted people to read my stuff. So I'm happy with this time, but it's stressful.
Okay. Well, um, I'll give you a chance to kind of give a final um,
Sure.
spiel at the end here, but do you have time to play 5 questions?
Oh yeah, always.
Okay. Question number 1. What's your favorite shrimp dish?
Oh man. You know what's funny is I work right next to a Popeyes, and I was going there getting their popcorn shrimp nonstop to the point where they took it off the menu, and I kept having to drive up and be like, "Hey, when's that coming back?" So they've got just the best popcorn shrimp. I'm basic. I like my popcorn shrimp, but there's no shrimp I won't eat. If I'm being honest, I'll eat it all. I like the ones with the tails. I'll eat any of them. I would put Red Lobster out of business if they brought back all you can eat shrimp.
Nice. Question number 2. Obviously this has a very Western feel.
Mhm.
Do you have any favorite Westerns? Any favorite, or gunslingers that kind of you like to
I
draw
feel
from?
like I feel like it's really basic to call out the spaghetti westerns like you know, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I mean they're classics, so it's a really simple answer. But if I wanted to go, I guess, a little off kilter and not pick the super easy ones, I'm a diehard Back to the Future fan. Back to the Future Part 3, you know, takes place Old West. I love the Western comedy feel of that movie, even though a lot of people are like, "Oh, the sequels are terrible." I still love the third Back to the Future movie. And if you can't tell by, you know, the comedy feel of my comic, I love a good Western comedy. So
Okay. Question number 3. Is there a property? It could be any, major property. I mean, since you're not really into, the superhero genre,
yeah,
I'll expand it to properties that you would kind of like a chance to take a stab at.
I've actually posted this many times, and it's such a random, obscure thing that I feel like I've got a shot. Like if they ever needed to do this, I'm like, hey, I'm the only guy that can write this. There was a video game I used to play all the time back on the PS2 days called Time Splitters. One of my favorite games of all time, and I've always said, I was like, look, I've got an idea. I want to make a comic in this universe. There's no interest for this book. No one's asking for a Time Splitters comic, but I got an idea. I've always was like, look, I have no interest in writing a licensed book for the most part. Like, there's a lot of things I'm just not, I'd never feel qualified. Like, you could hand me the rights to, you know, hey, we want you to draw the next Spider-Man. I'd be like, what can I add that hasn't already
Yeah.
been done? But that's like one random. If it's something obscure that I love or something
Spider
that
shrimps.
hasn't, yeah. Basically, it's like give me a property that no one's touched in years, and I'll run with it. But like,
Yeah.
so something like that, or there was a small run. I just mentioned it a minute ago, but there was a small run of Back to the Future comics they did a while back, and I was like, oh, that would be fun to write a little comic in the Back to the Future universe. I'd do that. So something like
Was
that, where they're not.
was that IDW that did that?
I think so. I didn't read
Yeah.
all of them. I bought one of the paperbacks a while back, and I never finished it, but I just thought it was. I just wanted to own it because I thought it was cool that Back to the Future was in comics.
Well, video games are, kind of a, from what I can tell, a perfect thing for, because there's the games, there's the game, but there's also, there's backstory,
Oh,
there's,
I feel
plenty,
like
plenty that you can expand on.
yeah, and they're always doing these tie-ins for comics that I don't think a lot of people uh, are paying too close attention to. But it's like you got your Dead Space comics and Resident Evil. Sometimes it's like there's so much potential for these games, and you can just have any side story you want. I feel like there's nobody really like focusing too hard on what's going on in the comics. I feel like you could be as creative as you want in books like that, and it's like no one's really paying that close attention, like up top, like, hey, make sure this comic ties in perfectly. So it's like whole worlds you could explore.
Okay, question number 4.
Mhm.
What writers, and they can be from any, area, kind of inspire you? Do you kind of, draw inspiration
Yeah.
or kind of your style from?
Uh, if I mean, I know you said I can go anywhere, but my brain went right to comics, of course. But huge fan of Brian K. Vaughan. He writes Saga. He wrote Y the Last Man, uh, Paper Girls. I've always thought I've loved his writing style. I think he's just really great at what he does. Right. He's another bald guy who I'm like, hey, representation. But he's just something about his writing style. He's great at doing these like serious stories that have these really heavy themes, but these characters are so likable and so funny, and but also can have these incredibly dark moments. And I've always thought he's great. If I'm going beyond that, I would say, which I mean, I know Neil Gaiman's done comics, but I love his books more than like I've read The Sandman, but his books are what really draw me. So Neil Gaiman, I think, is just an incredible writer. I love the weird mysticism he can put into his stories. I think that's just great. Really, it's all these writers who write these incredibly like symbolic stories and stuff that it's like it almost makes me as a writer feel bad because I'm like, man, I could never write that. That's amazing. Like you read these stories, I feel like I need to start reading some crappier books because I'm just like I'm gonna have a complex or something. Like, how did somebody come up with something so good? Right, but it's something to strive for. Like I would love to one day write a story that's much heavier and much more serious. And as much as I enjoy, like I can write comedy, no problem. I can do that all day. But like to really write something that like emotionally affects you in like a real way, I want to do that one day.
All right, so some question of writers. Who are your comedy influences? I mean, you've kind of, we've kind of talked about some of the, films and stuff that,
Mm-hmm.
but are there any like comedians that kind of?
Comedians, I never like focused heavily on like stand-up comedy in general. Like, I mean, I've caught some here and there. I was always really big on the animated comedies from, now they're old comedies, but to me, I don't feel as old as I am, I guess. But like, I was a big Futurama fan, a big The Simpsons fan, early Simpsons at least, and 30 Rock to me, one of the funniest shows ever
Mhm.
made. And it's all these shows that can do but Futurama specifically is one of my favorites just because it can do these really lowbrow, stupid comedy jokes that you at first glance you're like, that's dumb. But then at the same time can also do these really like you have to think about it kind of jokes and also have these weirdly moving episodes that, everyone references the one where the dog dies, but to me it's there's an episode about Fry's brother and how he named his son after Fry, and like I'm over here like this show's supposed to make me laugh and I'm crying. But like I think Futurama's got to be like one of the greatest shows. At least the early Futurama.
I
I mean,
agree.
it's come back multiple times now, and it's always a little bit less. I feel like, but it's still a great show. I think.
Yeah, I not to get too far off track, but I had this back when DVDs were. I still have them, but I would watch the episode,
Oh
then
yeah.
I'd watch it with commentary track, and it's just
I still, for the record, I still buy DVDs. I bought which it's funny because I bought the Futurama, the complete collection, because I love that show so much. And then right after I bought it, they announced they were coming back yet again. So I was like, well, it's not the complete collection anymore, I guess. But I've got most of the Futurama collection, I guess. But that show, I love it. I'll still go back and watch the first 4 or 5 seasons. Not to go on a tangent, but like when they did the movies, like after they came back the first time, they did Bender's Big Score. If you've seen the ending of that one, where the big reveal at the end, I'm like, man, this show's great. Still love it.
Question 5. How have you grown as a writer? You know, even you're still early in your career, but how have you grown? From your work with the Citizen to Pistol Shrimp and
I definitely think
today.
Yeah, I think if I were when I go back, because I don't, I try not to go back and keep rereading old stuff I wrote because sometimes that can be brutal. But I have gone back and looked at the Citizen, and I'm still happy with it overall. But I definitely feel like looking at that one, it's like, oh, I was writing a character that was basically just me or very similar to me, and I think I've gotten better at not just because anything you write, you're going to, in some way, empathize with the main character, probably, or it's going to have some aspect of yourself in it. But with the Citizen, I feel like I was almost like, oh, here's what I would do in this situation, a little too much sometimes. And I've kind of been able to get away from that recently. Like I said, I think I wrote, honestly, the first issue of the Citizen I wrote as far back as 2013, I want to say. I was probably like 19 years old when I wrote that, or I don't know how old I was at that point. 20, I think I was 20. And I wrote that first issue, and then I didn't continue into the second issue for like another 8 years because it didn't get published until 2019. So even from that first to second issue, it's like a big jump in quality, in my opinion. So with Pistol Shrimp, I was like, look, I'm going to make a main character that isn't, has a little bit different of a personality than me. I don't want to be just the exact same character as I had in The Citizen. And I've written several things, not even just comics. I've had short stories published before with the No Sleep podcast. I wrote a horror story. And I just feel like writing anything in general, just you're always going to get a little bit better, even if it doesn't feel like it. So I've gotten better with just more not authentic, more natural feeling plots, I guess I should say. Like where it used to feel like I had characters following signposts and hey, the plot needs you to do this thing, so go do that thing. And you eventually learn that's not the way to tell a good story. It's, you can come up with the plot in your head, but sometimes you got to have a character who's like, hey, I'm going to do something you're not going to expect. And yeah, you want me to react in this way so that I can get to plot point B, but that's not what this character is going to do. This character is going to do something totally different. And that's going to build the story. And it feels way more organic that way. And it's a lot better that way, honestly.
Okay, well, as we wrap up here, how about you kind of give us one last pitch for the Kickstarter
Sure.
and where people can find you and your stuff online?
Pistol Shrimp is on Kickstarter right now. Just search it. It's Pistol Shrimp number 1 and 2. I'm also on Global Comics. Well, let me pitch what Pistol Shrimp is so that you know to go to the Kickstarter. If you like comedy, if you want your comics to make you laugh, and if you're looking for something a little bit on the crazier side, but also it's gonna sometimes, like I said with Futurama, sometimes I'm gonna shoot for some real authentic moments, and it's gonna feel like real characters doing real things in a really ridiculous kind of setting. If that sounds interesting to you, go check out Pistol Shrimp. Read the first issue. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. You can decide for yourself if it's something you're into. Just look it up on Global Comics. Again, it's called Pistol Shrimp. You can also find me. I'm on Twitter under Charlie McFarland. I've got a Facebook, I think, too. My wife kind of runs that more than I do, but I'm on there. It's a lot of the same stuff I'm saying on Twitter. So Twitter's the place to find me more than anything.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat, and best of luck as you wrap up the campaign. And
Well, thank you for having
maybe
me.
and well, and when we'll keep pushing,
For
pushing,
sure.
putting it out there, and I would love to have you back
Yeah.
when you're ready to do issue 3.
Well, I'm happy to be back. I'm always excited to do this kind of stuff.
All right. Well, again, we'll be in touch, and have a good evening.
All right. See you guys.
Later.